and there's this assumption from the leadership that since her husband is from another country, he doesn't want to take the holidays or doesn't observe the holidays. And an incorrect assumption, because obviously people would like a holiday.
Welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jacob, that's Jackson, and we're excited to have you back with us for episode 2 of a very, very new season.
Yeah, we are rolling along as we are getting into the rhythm of this new season with the new the regular updates, the regular posting. Excited to have you all join in us again, and excited to continue our habit of kind of rolling through so many great plays. Excited today for today's conversation, as well as the ones that we have upcoming. But today we're talking about The Heart Sellers by Lloyd Suh, and it's exciting to have the chance to return to it.
Yes, the Heart Sellers, lovely, very, very funny, very touching, very specific two-hander. I think we're going to have a great time talking about it. It's about immigration. It's about loneliness. It's about the Nixon administration. I guess that may be unfair. It's probably not about the Nixon administration, but the Nixon administration is referenced heavily.
Features prominently.
Features prominently. It's a period piece. This is our second time talking about Lloyd Suh on the podcast. You may remember from season 7 or 8, something like that. We talked about Charles Francis Chan Jr.'s exotic Oriental murder mystery. I believe that was the title, or something very close to. There's that title on the one hand, and then on this side of the table, you've got The Heart Sellers. And those feels like a spectrum to me of titles.
For sure. A little bit more succinct with this title.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah, but certainly the kind of intricacy of characters, the visceralness of characters, and also just the genuineness, all still there. So excited to have today's conversation about it. Before we jump into the conversation, though, wanted to take just a second to say thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast. Thank you all so much for being patrons of the show and being the reason that this show gets to continue. We love getting to do these shows, love getting to have these conversations, talk about theater's best scripts with all of you out there in podcast land, at the patrons over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast. Make that happen. If you're looking for a way to help out the show a significant amount, and also to just find another way to be a part of the No Script community, Patreon's a great way to do that. We have a number of different tiers of patronship over there, lowest one being just $1, $12 over the course of the year, and we got access to all sorts of fun stuff. We got patron-only posts, we got access to some of the scripts we're doing ahead of time, we got access to the themed month ahead of time, so there's some fun stuff over there for you to check out. But thank you to all those who have already made the choice to do so and become patrons of the show. And if you're looking for a way to help out the show, whether you're a first-time listener or a many-time listener, we'll see you over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast.
And now back to the script.
Here we go.
Hey, okay, so Lloyd Suh, as we talked about, already have had him on the podcast. Well, not had him on the podcast, but discussed him on the podcast. So
that'd be cool, though.
Won't do a full context section, but I will provide this update. This might be the first time that this has happened in No Script.
Whoa.
Since the last time we talked about Lloyd Suh, there has been a major development in his career, which is that his play The Far Country was a finalist for the 2023 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. So since this podcast has been alive, he's written several new plays, the one of which we're discussing today, but not even the one that we're discussing today. A different new play was nominated and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. That's how long this podcast has been going. And also, one of the great things about our focus being on contemporary new plays. We do a lot of different kinds of scripts. We do a lot of scripts from the 20th century. We've done ancient Greek plays. We've done Shakespeare's. We try to keep it varied. But as a general kind of guiding principle, our zone is in contemporary American scripts. And when you do that, you get get to be along for the ride that is these working playwrights that, may very well right now as you're listening be sitting in their office or den or whatever somewhere writing the new play that will win this award, get that production, show up on this podcast later. One of the really cool things, I just wanted to provide that update that since he was last talked about on the podcast, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah,
how cool is that?
Yeah, no, that's wicked cool for sure. Yeah, no, and it's exciting. We tend to do Pulitzer Prize winning plays, so stay tuned. We might get to turn to that one in the future as well. But yeah, excited for the excited. It's exciting to kind of get to track along with the playwright for a while and get exposed to both the scripts that they have in the moment and the scripts that are to come.
Absolutely. This play, The Heart Sellers, is a play that's based on the life and the lived experience of Suh's mother, who was an immigrant here to this country. But so that's part of one part of the impetus for the play. Another part that is really interesting to me, and I'm actually interested in having a longer conversation about this once we get into the conversation. This play was written during the pandemic. And that is very interesting to me because of what this play is. As you'll talk about in the summary, Jackson, there is a locked at home by myselfness to this script, right? And it was literally, he wrote it during the pandemic while we were all locked at home.
Yeah.
So I find that very, very fascinating. It'd be interesting to look at more plays that we know were written during the sort of isolating part of the pandemic. But the other thing that was happening at that time in our country was during the Trump presidency, or regardless of your thoughts on it, one of the major hot button issues was immigration and immigration policy. The diatribe, the racially motivated policy making that was happening and was being played out on the news every night also heavily motivated Suh in deciding to write this script, which is about the can-be isolating experience of being an immigrant. So those three things to me are the kind of three-headed inspiration monster that created The Heart Sellers. The Suh's mother and her actual literal experience of what her life was like as an immigrant, the pandemic itself, and the conversations, the really racially motivated conversations around immigration that were happening during the Trump presidency. The play got its world premiere at the Milwaukee Repertory Theater in February of 2023, directed by Jennifer Chang. We don't talk about the Milwaukee Rep much, but that is an absolutely astoundingly awesome institution for new plays. They are still one of the champions of new work at the regional level. This was the premiere of this play was part of something called World Premiere Wisconsin, which I'm just going to now read from their little marketing blurb about it, is an inaugural statewide festival celebrating new plays and musicals happening. It was last spring and early summer was the inaugural presentation of this. It's presented by something called the 10 Chimneys Foundation. So this was spearheaded by 3 Wisconsin regional professional theaters, the Forward Theater Company of Madison, the Northern Sky Theater of Door County, and Milwaukee Rep, which was where this play took place. This World Premiere Wisconsin Festival was created with these goals. It was created to build relationships with Wisconsin theater makers, to raise national awareness about Wisconsin's thriving and diverse theater ecosystem, to encourage the production of new work, and to communicate a positive story about theater making in Wisconsin in the aftermath of the pandemic. So I wanted to just give a shout out to that idea. I don't know whether or not it happened again this year, but I love the idea of bringing awareness to the really strong regional professional community that is in Wisconsin through the production of new works. And out of it, of course, we get a great play like The Heart Sellers. Heart Sellers goes on to have a pretty well-lauded production at the Huntington in Boston in the late part of 2023. And then this year, it started, it's going to start later from when this podcast airs, which would be in the fall. Starting later this year in 2024, there is another sort of interesting cooperative endeavor around this play, looking at the sort of beginning and ending of this play in these kind of theater cooperations, not ending, but current life. 3 regional professional theaters in California are sort of jointly producing production of the Heart Sellers that will play for a full stint as part of their seasons at each place and will be part of their regular season tickets and regular marketing packages. But the production itself will just move between the 3 houses. So if you're in California, you have 3 chances to see this play in the next 6 to 8 months. First at Capitol Stage in Sacramento, according to what I know right now, and the final details of the dates are not all available to me right now, so I'm just going to give the information that I have as of recording this. October, November of 2024, so coming up very, very soon at the release of this podcast, at the Capitol Stage in Sacramento, you have a chance to see the Heart Sellers. In Berkeley, California, at the Aurora Theater Company in February of 2025. So this coming February, you have a chance to see it. And then later in the spring of 2025, it will be playing at Theater Silicon Valley. So a kind of idea of jointly producing this play and then passing it around to live in residence as part of each of those 3 theaters' seasons. Love the story of cooperation and ensemble building in the regional professional theater community that has produced this play that has a life and certainly will continue to have a great life. The Heart Sellers by Lloyd Suh.
Yeah, excited to keep an eye out for it, and excited to, I'll extend this invitation out to anyone at the end of the show again, as we always do, but excited to hear how the show goes, especially if you're able to catch those 3 shows out in California, or, definitely have the chance for that.
Second episode, second try of the season. If anybody wants to fly us out to California,
he's going for it again.
See the Heart Sellers at one of those 3 places, we'll produce a video episode and give a shout out to you as sort of the sponsor and funder of the episode. We'll have a second conversation about the Heart Sellers. So Capitol Stage, Aurora Theater Co., and Theater Silicon Valley. If anybody knows anybody in leadership there, point them to us. They could bring us out. We could do like a live episode during like intermission or right after the show at like a bar. We could like have an audience thing. We could chat. Hey, so Capitol Stage, Aurora Theater Co., Theater Silicon Valley. This is for you. Bring us out. We'd love to come see the show. We'd love this play, and then we could imagine some sort of cool integration between the podcast and your production around it. So get in touch. noscriptpodcast@gmail.com.
Love it. Yep. Phenomenal. Yeah. Reach out. We'd love to chat with you. But for our chat today, I'm going to give us just a little bit of synopsis of this play, or rather summary for this play. I already said this last episode, but in case you're tuning in to the second episode of the season, we're moving a little more towards summary for this section, just so we can get into the conversation a little bit faster. So I'm just going to give you a brief summary of this play. This play takes place on the early evening on Thanksgiving Day in November 22nd, 1973. Now, if that date seems specific to you, it is. It's because this play is kind of set within the Nixon administration, and the sort of like context of this play is the Heart Seller Act. And that's HARTCELLAR, last names of people who, signed this bill or worked on this bill.
But you can, of course, already see where this play is going.
There you go. Yeah. There'll be a tie-in to that from the title for sure. But basically, the Heart Seller Act broadened who was allowed to come in via immigration into the country. So that's the briefest version of what it does. But the play starts with a a chunk of the Lyndon B. Johnson's talking about that bill as kind of in the pre-notes of the show. So definitely set within that, but also set within the Nixon. At one point during the play, Nixon gives his speech, his like "I am not a crook" speech. So it's, and he does it via TV. So it's like happening that day. So there you go. There's your setting in time. We're not focused on really them at all, though. We're not focused on Nixon. We're not focused on the bill all that much, except as to how it affects our two main characters, and that is Luna and Jane. Now, Luna's actual name is Luningning Ignacia Mangajas de la Rosario Bustos, and she is 23, Filipina, female. And then we have Jane, who is Hong Jae-ha, 23, and she is Korean, female. Those are just their character descriptions, just to get us started on the same foot there. And they have just recently met in a Kmart. They met on a Kmart because Luna was there shopping on Thanksgiving Day, because they both, turns out, but Luna certainly as the one kind of instigator of their finding each other, is there shopping because her husband is working. Both their husbands work in healthcare. And working on a holiday.
First year residency medical students. So
yeah,
if you're associated in your life with someone who is doing their residency, the consuming hours that it is to be a first year resident has certainly infected their lives. Their husbands are away at hospital. All the time, all day.
Yeah, and yeah. So they're away all the time, and they've seen each other at Kmart before, but this is like the first time that Luna has kind of connected with Jane and asked her to come over to her place, and they do. They go over to Luna's place, and the play is just their interaction at Luna's place on Thanksgiving Day as they like make food together, and Luna has like kind of spontaneously bought a turkey, but it turns out it's frozen, and they're trying to cook it, but it takes forever to cook a frozen turkey. And them kind of negotiating the newness of this tradition. They're both recently immigrated to the States, and the newness of this tradition, the newness of living in America, the newness of Kmart, the newness of being, they talk about confidence and how at home confidence felt like something completely different than it feels here, and how it's hard to negotiate that. They talk about some of their similarities, both being from kind of the Pacific area, but also some of their dissimilarities with Jane being of Korean descent and Luna being of Filipina descent. So there's the similarities, but camaraderie builds between the two of them. Probably the only thing we'll get into a bunch of the individual moments, because there's kind of like a bunch of swings of their interaction as they slowly warm up to each other and eventually get more and more comfortable, ultimately culminating in like essentially a sleepover. Like some food is spilled at one point, and so the clothes they were wearing out and about are not functional anymore, so they put on like pajamas and they're hanging out on the couch and very comfortable. A notable story, Luna is like often the storyteller of the group. she has a robust vocabulary and kind of says things quickly and often. But one of her big stories is this kind of dream that she has of arriving at Disneyland. Disneyland features prominently. It's where she and her husband honeymooned, or just outside of Disneyland. And this dream that she has is they're in Disneyland, and as they're entering the country, that's where they're like checking them in to the country in this dream, the custom agents. And as part of the transaction of coming into the country, she has to give up her heart. She has to sell her heart. And so that kind of connection to the title, the Heart Seller Act and the Heart Sellers, and her and Jane's kind of ongoing negotiation of the grief of leaving home to try to make home here, and what it means for their hearts, what it means for their lives, what it means for their interactions with each other, with their husbands, with their communities, with their children to be who are not here yet. All of that is in negotiation as they find camaraderie on Thanksgiving night in the 70s. I forgot the exact date now that I actually said it. 73. Yes. Kind of find each other and solace in each other as they are navigating all this newness in a new world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a two-hander. It runs short enough that you generally don't need an intermission. So say the reviews. It's just this kind of this story of human connection, right? I mean, it's wildly funny, and it's funny from that position of like strangers who are working on each other to try to impress each other. I think that is one of the things that strikes me so much about The Heart Sellers is the decision to make this a play about two strangers. You know, we talk a lot about like high context and low context relationships. A high context relationship being a relationship that has a lot of history and backstory, people who know each other very well, your friends, your work associates, your whatever, right, can be high context relationships. A low context relationship is a relationship where there's not a lot of history and backstory, like people who check you out at the supermarket, people who you're sitting next to on the subway, strangers, right? And this is a play about a low context relationship. And the thing about low context relationships is that it's very hard to get really into the meat of your real life when you're writing for low context relationships, because that's not something that we talk about. We don't talk about the meat of our lives with low context folks around us, right? I don't go to the barista and just spill the deepest, hardest parts of my life. That's just not how our society is organized, right?
Well.
But somehow, okay. But somehow Lloyd Suh has written this play about two strangers that really accesses like the real deep meat of their life. And in fact, both of them have a high context relationship. Each of them has a spouse who are sort of absentee spouses. The high context relationship in their life does not offer the kind of closeness and reciprocity that they're looking for.
Yeah, I super agree. I think the crucible for the deepness of this conversation is a sort of forced isolation that they have gone through in their personal lives. And that forced isolation has a couple different tiers, right? So you have the isolation of moving to a new country and trying to learn the language. I think Jane is the one who talks frequently about like she watches television shows all the time trying to pick up the language, and she actually ends up being the person who like knows Julia Childs and knows how to take a shot at cooking the turkey and cooking the yams, etc. So there is this kind of isolation from that. But then you're also right noticing that their high context relationships, their husbands, are gone most of the time because they're in their first year of residency, but also they're the new folks. They just moved in from another country. I think Jane mentions, either Jane, I'm gonna say it's Jane, mentions how, and there's this assumption from the leadership that since her husband is from another country, he doesn't want to take the holidays or doesn't observe the holidays. And an incorrect assumption, because obviously people would like a holiday. But by virtue of that, they're working all the time, and so they're often alone. And so there is that like I found someone, and I'm gonna choose to move into this deep zone with them fairly quickly because I'm feeling so isolated, because there's this connection with each other, and I think there's a way to forge a path together, and they go really deep as a result of that very quickly.
Well, and to even further that, there are other high context relationships in their lives that Jane and Luna mention, but those are people that they have left behind in their own countries. And there's a great monologue from Luna late in the play about like what changing she is experiencing as a result of this moving to America, and how it even now, if she were to go back to the people at home, she's a different person now than she was then. They comment often on the disparity of experience between their life in their home country and their previously home country and their life here in America. Very early in the play, they use this great metaphor about American dust. Luna says, "American dust is funny. It bothers me more than dust back home." And so the forced isolation, or maybe the just the enforced isolation of their particular circumstance does seem like it is the setup, right, for that closeness. The other thing that is the setup for their closeness is the alcohol. Now, it feels to me
Yeah.
like it's been a long time in no script history since we have last discussed the role that alcohol plays
It's true.
in
Probably
drama.
yeah,
But it feels like we're back like in a Eugene O'Neill world.
I was gonna
where
say
the liquor's got to be flowing in order for us to like really get into why these characters share these things. And that might be right. I mean, just practically the other low context situation where you might like really share a deep part of yourself would be like sitting next to somebody at the bar.
Right.
4 drinks in, right? You start to say things that are maybe a little more personal. I mean, at one point, again, Luna and Jane, these strangers, are like discussing their sex lives with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not like in a guarded way either. In like a pretty vulnerable, funny, self-mocking way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree. This yeah, I was gonna say probably one of the O'Neill plays is the last time we talked about alcohol as a device, but the way that this play especially uses it as a remover of inhibitions, which alcohol is often used as in plays to kind of get below whatever the surface level is, but also I liked the payoff of this one so much better than so many other uses of it, because it truly does lead to this like connection point. And almost always when alcohol is used as a tool for removing inhibitions, there is this connection, but also that connection like breaks something. Or the degree to which you are vulnerable breaks something irrevocably. Something is said that cannot be undone. And to an extent that is true in this play, but the thing that sort of can't be undone is it's hard to imagine that these two women won't be friends in the future. In fact, they like plan out a couple tomorrows in a pretty beautiful series of kind of visionary moving forward of planning tomorrows together.
One reviewer called that last soliloquy by Jane at the end, where she describes this sort of adventures that she and Luna are going to go on in the tomorrow and the tomorrow and the tomorrow. One reviewer called that one of the most beautiful soliloquies they had ever seen on stage. I would be anxious, hint to the beginning of the episode, for one of those theater companies to fly us out and see it. I'd be anxious to see this show just for that reason, because I was also so moved by the sort of shared life that Jane imagines for her and Luna at the end.
Yeah, I was kind of struck by Jane's ability to focus future and Luna's ability to hold past in this play. Which is an interesting kind of side by side to have, because Luna, so Jane frequently is out talked by Luna, and so for the first half of the play we're with Luna quite a bit, but by the end of the play Jane kind of picks up a lot more and has this sort of like just good friend sort of things to say to Luna, who is actually like dealing with quite a lot of grief. And Jane kind of helps Luna kind of move, or encourages Luna to see a world in which she moves past that grief, or moves through, moves with, etc., to a tomorrow. And so her kind of vision casting of the future and the hope that Jane brings to the equation is really, really impactful. Luna, though, is this like her name is as long as it is because she has all of her family names in her name. She has her name, her mother's maiden name, her father's name, her husband's name, it's her confirmation name is the wrong thing. But it isn't. Okay, cool. But yeah, so all of those names are kind of woven into her name. She is focused on that. She is focused on the real grief of like, if I have kids someday, it's going to be really hard to like tell them where I'm from and have them understand that the same way that me and my mom have an understanding of that place. And also my mom and I's relationship are changing because I'm here in America now. So it's interesting to have them both together in this moment as they navigate those two. I just noticed the two different focuses of them, at least as they find each other.
I know that's a really interesting way to put it. I think that Luna does tell a lot more stories of the past, I think, than Jane does, which is really interesting. Jane also is, or previously was, an art student. And so Jane has this sort of subplot, as much as there can be a subplot in a two-hander, of like what what her hope for her life was, and this sort of like dream of being a painter that ends up coming up in that conversation there at the end. But I think in part because of that, I don't know if you call it like a lost dream. Like it does feel like for Jane, one of the things of her life is like having given up being an art student and a painter to come to America with her husband and be like basically be as her whole identity the wife of a doctor. And what that means, like what that version of her life means different than what she thought. I thought Jane has, for as out-talked as Jane is by Luna, I find when Jane does have something to say, it's really, really interesting stuff. Her discussion, it's fairly late in the play. She starts to talk about like this idea of making the safe choice and having like made the safe choice throughout her life. And there's, to me, a really interesting rebuttal of this like brave immigrant kind of paternalizing like story that like In Power America tells about like the immigrant experience. He's like these brave, hardworking folks on a big adventure that sort of like infantilizes them. And Jane has a really interesting thing to say, which is right, like she met her would-be husband, and he was going to move to America to be a doctor, and that was part of that decision to marry him. And she says this, I don't know, sometimes America, seems like a big adventure, but sometimes seems like the safe way, because I do the same thing like everybody else that says is the best way. Sorry, I'm trying to read as I go here. She says, whole my life prepare for become best wife, good support, follow husband, even to most far place can imagine. Yes. And right, this idea that even coming to America might have been the safe choice for her life. And I don't know that the play intends to land on like this idea that it's not incredibly brave and does not take a lot of courage and moral like fortitude and robust toughness to get through the immigrant experience. And I don't know that even for Jane the character that thought is resolved. But the exploration of this idea that like, did I just, by moving around the world away from my family, ultimately was that just me deciding to go with the safe path laid ahead of me instead of this other thing that I may have really wanted for my life that may have involved some risk?
Yeah. The way that her art kind of weaves its way back into where she's at now, and makes that question really poignant. Whether or not there is something still there to explore. She eventually ends up saying that she would paint Luna in some way in one of their tomorrows. And so there is this kind of hope.
It's a great resolve, because early when she's talking about being an art student, she talks about painting like a tree, and then painting a stream, and then painting a flower, and that someday she wants to paint the whole forest. And then she talks about painting an arm or a leg, and someday she wants to paint the whole person. That's fairly early in the play. And then in that final soliloquy, last page of the play, she describes wanting to paint Luna, and not just like all of her like physically, but all of her sadness and her joy and her loneliness and her connection and her relationship. And she describes wanting to paint like all of her, put all of that into a painting. It's just really lovely writing to resolve that earlier idea, the sort of not small, but the unformed idea of Jane's, to resolve it into this sort of lovely full picture of it at the end.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, what was your experience, Jacob, of reading this play? I found myself often reminding myself that they were 23-year-olds.
Yeah.
And
what was crazy was watching clips.
Oh, yeah,
because
sure.
You read it, and I totally agree. They're like the characters, it's hard to remember their youth. And then you watch the clips, and I mean, it's two like early 20s actors doing this role, and it like, I don't know, it is. I'm totally with you. It's like a whoa.
Yeah. The scope, like what you described, of Jane's scope of her life around like giving up artistry, moving to here, all of those things. Like it sounds like, you know, a good chunk of life has been into this. But then you kind of like zero in on like how much of this experience has been kind of crammed into few short years for them. And you see how that's another added part of the crucible of just so much change has happened, and so to find someone to get to share all that change with is that much more impactful, is that much more tempting to reveal more of yourself to them as a result of having found something to kind of align with.
Yeah, but also I think in Jane's journey there, that's like captured. I can't remember the word right now, but it's the word for like the part represents the whole in the way that her painting represents her whole journey. That painting idea of seeing all of Luna, right? In that is this idea of being in a situation such that the immigrant experience may be where you don't feel like people see all of you. Mm-hmm. Where, you know, they talk a lot about in this play about how different it is to be in a totally different culture and language. I remember last season we read English, the Sanaz Tusi play that won the Pulitzer Prize, about Iranian folks learning to speak English. And there's that really powerful scene in English where one of the students basically reads their med school entrance essay aloud in Farsi because they wanted to make clear, I'm not stupid. I'm actually really, really, really intelligent. I get top scores in everything. But when you're speaking a language that's not the language that you grew up with, it can be hard to like be yourself, to be all of yourself. Luna describes how in the Philippines, her husband is not shy. He's actually kind of exuberant. And in America, he's incredibly shy. He doesn't talk to people. He doesn't go out of his way to make conversation. So there is a way in which the play explores that, like, wanting to be all of yourself, to like be able to have all of you represented and understood and experienced by your community, that is part of the loneliness or the isolation that Jane and Luna are experiencing.
Yeah, that the shared heart language is as much a part of shared experience as living with someone as well. There's the kind of like shared the sharedness of a shared language, the sharedness of a shared confidence. Confidence is also a term that they use pretty in one or two poignant moments for sure, of like confidence is so hard to find here because there's so much new all the time, so much different all the time that we're adapting to. And so yeah, I think that the way that they end up kind of grappling with that, with trying to find friends, is also interesting, because like Luna and her husband are trying to like make friends. At least Luna tells a story about how she has seen Jane before from afar at some gathering, and wound up not saying hi to her there. But then also, like, when she brought up like wanting to find a way to say hi, there was this conversation between her and her husband of like, well, we kind of need to make friends who are from America to try to find a way forward this way. And so there was that complication, and them trying to find each other, in Jane and Luna trying to find each other this evening as well.
Yeah, that the part that Jane and Luna are not actually strangers is one of the, like, as much as this play doesn't really trade in secrets, which it's hard to have a play about secrets with low context characters. So
right.
There's not like a lot of secret things that the characters reveal or something that they say that they shouldn't have said across the course of this play. It's just not that kind of play. But in as much as there is this idea that at the beginning of the play, Jane and Luna both equally maintain this story that they are total strangers who just happen to run into each other at the supermarket, and oh my gosh, how crazy, we're wearing the same coat, and why don't you come up and have a bite to eat? That's the story they tell about why this night is happening. And I got the experience, at least from my perspective, very early. I had this experience of like, yeah.
Right.
So you're just like a total stranger at the supermarket, and now you're just gonna like hang out all night. And one of the sort of, if there is any secrets at all in this play, the thing that gets revealed is that they are not actually strangers. They both finally are able to be vulnerable enough in getting to know each other to go back and forth and equally reveal, well, actually, I've seen you at all of these different places. We go to the same Kmart. We've both been to the resident picnics. We've shopped at the same supermarket. And I've just been too scared to come and talk to you. And so they both reveal that this night is not the result of two random strangers meeting in the supermarket, but of several months of longing to make this connection finally happening. There's a great clue to that early on. Luna reveals, like in the second or third page, that she knows how long Jane has been in the country. And for me, that was the first moment when I was like, wait a minute, what? Yeah. I thought you just met at the supermarket. And so little clues like that get sprinkled throughout, and pretty late in the play, maybe 80% through the play, they're finally both able to say, oh, wait, no. Actually, this has been something we've been wanting and waiting for a long time.
Yeah, and I love how this play, like in those reveal moments or in moments when something unexpected happens, like I feel like a similar caliber moment is when like the food, they're laughing so hard that like Luna like ends up like spitting food all over the place, including onto Jane. They're all, when a line gets crossed, when a secret's revealed, or when a new threshold is crossed in terms of friendship, laughing so hard you spit. There is this moment of like, wait. Is it all? Is this night gonna like shatter or fall apart, or is this the line that gets crossed that suddenly we're not friends anymore? And over, there is this like reconnection. It's all good, laughter, and continuing to share. Even like some of Jane's comments back to Luna, as she pushes her a little bit. Luna shares oftentimes these kind of like touching, sad things, really difficult things about what she's either wanting or missing out on, or wishing was a part of her life. And Jane kind of comes back with like, that was really sad. And Luna's like, I'm sorry. And Jane's like, no, don't be sorry. But wow, that was really sad. You need to be happier. And there is that same moment of like, oh, did a threshold just get crossed? And or a line get crossed? And once and over, there is this reconnect that happens after those lines get crossed.
Absolutely. There's a great interview with Lloyd Suh. There's several about the play. In this one for WGBH, he's talking about how the play deals with the politics of immigration and why it's set amidst the Nixon administration and all that, which we could maybe briefly talk about in a second. But he talks about like that kind of intentional connection being the core of the play. He says, I've talked a lot about the history and the politics and the legislation of it all, and that may seem kind of heavy, but that's all very much in the background. At the foreground of everything here is that these are two people who want to make a friend. They want to entertain each other. They want to make each other feel safe. They want to make each other have a good time so that they can make a real, honest connection. And so all the comedy comes from intention, wanting to make the other person laugh, wanting to feel what it feels like to laugh when you've been sitting in an apartment all alone for months. That's why I think it's primarily and principally and chiefly very much a comedy.
Yeah, and I mean that's clearly on display. There's so many like just great laughing moments, great moments where like hunger plays an important part in this play. Both of them get increasingly, especially Luna gets increasingly hungry as the play goes on, and so the negotiation over the turkey not cooking fast enough, and so they're just eating the yams, and the wine kind of continuously flowing is really interesting. So all those moments of like comedic joy as audience getting to watch these two kind of like try to find a way to entertain, to make sure that they like forge a friendship as they navigate all these tough moments are really enjoyable to see as a comedy as well.
And the tenuousness of it, right? The like both characters wanting sort of this, I think clearly both of them from the very beginning wanting this friendship to be something, but there is that like, I can't show how much I want this friendship to be something because that would be weird. So there's this kind of like dance, it's almost like a first date play.
Yeah.
It's very much not that. I want to be very clear that this play does not have any romantic undertones. There's no suspicion that the two of them are anything more than just going to be friends. But it has the energy of like, I want to impress you. I want this friendship relationship to grow and blossom into something. But how do I do that? Can I make you laugh? Can I be guarded? Can I reveal part of myself and then realize, oh, that was too much? How do I zip that back in with a quippy line or an over-exaggerated sort of something or other? And I love the physical transformation that Lloyd Suh has asked for at the end in the two of them changing into what they call home clothes, which are pajamas. They're basically, in all the clips and pictures and stuff that I've seen, they're basically night shirts is what they change into. But the change from like dressed up for the supermarket into this sort of comfortable, homey outfits for the final scenes of the play, and that it's Luna's clothing too. That Jane is like wearing Luna's clothing. That's such a like, just easy's not. Easy maybe has an undertone that it's like not worked for, but I just mean that it has like an ease of working so well. This smooth, like, oh, now they're comfortable with each other, and you can see that physically represented by the fact that they've changed clothes. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, clear, visual, obvious change has occurred by the end of the play, and that's by virtue of their vulnerability for sure. We're coming down to the end of the time, but it is worthwhile just to chat about the kind of political setting, as you said. We should just mention that to kind of have it there, because there's the political setting of the act itself, but also it's no small thing that Nixon's sort of "I'm not a crook" speech is played in this play, and the kind of power dynamic of people able to say that they are not crooks at the top when they are in fact crooks, and the not quite disparity, but the juxtaposition of that kind of carelessness of people who have all the power to Luna and Jane's kind of ability to navigate a really hard position and make a lot of change in themselves just to kind of get to baseline in this society is on full display by virtue of that moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think that there is something to be said in this play for setting this interaction on the night, the sort of representative night of one of the great political scandals of the American president, of recent American presidency, and I'll talk about another one in just a second, the Nixon administration, right? And that these two women are coming from countries of great political upheaval. And again, there is this kind of infantilizing racial trope story that America tells itself about, like, sort of rescuing these immigrants from these terrible political situations. And there's some commentary, I think, that Lloyd Suh is making by, in the middle of these two women, there is like our president doing much the same kind of backhanded, politically morally corrupt stuff that these leaders in those other countries way over there that do bad stuff do, right? And I think it's no surprise that a play with that kind of commentary comes out just shortly after the January 6th insurrection in the United States, right? I mean, the women talk about the violent coups that were taking place in their countries. And if you can think back to like world premiere of this play, where that violent coup attempt that happened in this country was still very much in the news and in conversation. And so the story that like America tells itself about, like, oh boy, you're so lucky to be here and to be out of those bad countries over there, I think is questioned in a subtle way. I mean, in that interview I read from Lloyd Suh, he talks about it being in the background, but still there.
Yeah, definitely there. Certainly by virtue of these couple scenes that connect us into American politics, but also just the way that they talk about their home countries, and talk about their desire to, especially Luna's like desire to still stay connected with her family there and all that. So yeah, it's absolutely being questioned in really interesting ways, and also it serves as a focus for kind of wondering around the kind of masculine power structure that a lot of the country is kind of governed by, in a way for them to reflect on how a lot of them their both their lives, but also that even their husbands' lives are kind of governed by this masculine power structure within America.
Yeah, amidst just like uproarious laughter,
Yeah.
turkey being spit into people's faces, dancing, singing, fun. The amount of laughter called for in the stage directions of this script is as high as I've ever seen it. I mean, the characters are constantly laughing, which again, if you think about this as a kind of first date play, like, I mean, it's been a long time since I've been on a first date, but I do remember on first dates laughing more than I normally laughed in everyday life. That's a memory now, but that is my memory of it.
It's going well, right? Yeah. For sure. There are so many facets of this play, so many great individual moments that we could continue chatting about. Alas, we are at the end of our time for this particular episode, but we would love to keep chatting about this play with all of you out there in podcast land. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or at X at the username at NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep talking about the Heart Sellers with you.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this conversation or any of the other conversations in our 12 full seasons into our 13th season, please recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes theater, that likes storytelling, conversations about writing and characters and themes and structures and that nerd stuff. This is the podcast for them. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, all the places that you find your podcasts, including liking our Facebook page where a link to the new episode appears every Monday when we publish. That's all for this episode. We've enjoyed having you for our conversation about The Heart Sellers by Lloyd Suh. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.